America is known as the land of the free and the home of the brave, but it wasn't always this way. In the 1700s, Great Britain controlled the 13 colonies in a way that the colonists despised. They fought for their independence in a chain of events that today is known as the American Revolution.
In 1754 to 1762, Great Britain fought in the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War. France and its Indian allies fought against Great Britain to determine who would control North America. Great Britain won, but also lost. They gained control of the land, which is what they wanted, but they were completely in debt from funding the war. To resolve their money issues, they passed several acts on the colonists of the land that they obtained in the war.
The Proclamation of 1763 stated that no citizen in the colonies could settle anywhere west of the Appalachian Mountains. This was done to maintain good relations between Great Britain and the Native Americans. This angered most of the colonists because those who had already settled there were forced to relocate on the other side of the mountain range.
On April 5, 1764, Great Britain passed an act that put taxes on all paper materials such as newspapers and magazines. This is known as the Stamp Act. The reason this act was passed was so that Great Britain could get back some of the money they had lost in the French and Indian War. This caused an outrage among the colonists and caused protests in which the colonists chanted, "No taxation without representation." The colonists weren't upset about having to pay money, they were upset because they did not have a seat in the British Parliament in which they could state their opinions and the needs of the British colonies.
In March 1765, the Quartering Act was passed. It stated that the colonists must accommodate and provide housing for British soldiers living in the colonies. Great Britain saw this as a return of kindness for sending over the soldiers to protect them from the Native Americans. Although this is what the British said, the colonists believed they were sent over to spy and keep them in line from acting out against Great Britain.
By 1770, the colonists were so upset that protests became a daily thing. On March 5th, patriots in the colonies banded together to protest Great Britain's power. They were throwing snowballs, stones, and sticks at a group of British soldiers. The soldiers decided to defend themselves and shot and killed 5 colonists.
The Tea Act was passed in May 1773, and it stated that the colonists could only import British tea. It did not impose a new tax, but it created a monopoly over tea in the British colonies. Later on in December, the colonists decided to act out against this unfair act. At night, the Sons of Liberty, dressed up as Mohawk Indians, snuck onto a ship carrying British tea and dumped all of it into the ocean. This is known as the Boston Tea Party. In return, in May and June of the next year, the British passed coercive acts, known as the Intolerable Acts, by the colonists. This was a series of taxes on all imports. It acted as a punishment for the Boston Tea Party.
From September 5th to October 26th, 1774, a group of men, known as the Delegates, met in Philadelphia to make sure all of the colonies were on the same page. At this meeting, they decided to raise militias to fight for their independence from Great Britain. They also decided to meet again. This was known as the First Continental Congress.
The militiamen were on their way to Concord to seize the weapons they had heard about, and when passing through Lexington, the British had already arrived in efforts to stop them. The first shot, commonly known as the shot heard around the world, initially began the Revolutionary War. The British went on marching to Concord after the Battle of Lexington and were surprised to see all the weapons gone when they got there. Little did they know the Patriots had moved them. The militiamen then attacked the British in the Battle of Concord. The British fled back to Boston, and the Patriots took the win.
In May 1775, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia soon after the Revolutionary War had begun. At this meeting, the delegates formed a government and decided to raise taxes to fund the war for their independence from Great Britain.
Just over a year later, in June 1776, Thomas Jefferson started writing the Declaration of Independence. This document explained and listed the grievances of why the colonies were declaring their independence from Great Britain. Today, we celebrate Independence Day on July 4th because on that day in 1776, 56 delegates signed the Declaration of Independence.
After the declaration was signed, it was sent to Great Britain. The British were not happy and continued to fight in the war. October 19, 1781, marked the end of a war and the beginning of a new nation. On that day, the British surrendered at Yorktown, declaring the Americans as the victors. The Americans went on to write a document to guide the new government of their country. The Articles of Confederation was written but failed to succeed. Soon after, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Constitution, which is still being used to guide our country's government to this day.